Welcome to Revenge Report. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let's dive in. I barely noticed my phone vibrating under the conference table. My focus was on the numbers, the data, the strategy, another quarterly review, another week of selling our growth. When I saw Matt's name on the screen, I swiped open the message, already bracing myself for whatever bomb was about to drop. Hey Sarah, hope you're doing well. Just wanted to let you know that Megan and I decided not to invite you to the family vacation this year. We're hoping for a quieter time with just us. No drama. Hope you understand. The words were cold, but it wasn't the first time. I felt a lump form in my throat, but I kept my face impassive. I typed back, quick and simple, understood. The meeting continued around me, but I wasn't really there anymore. My colleagues were mid-discussion about expanding our client base in the Midwest, and I nodded along, making the right noises, offering the right points, but my head was spinning. Matt and Megan, always the perfect couple, always the golden children. And here I was, in the middle of a business meeting, alone in my own success, and still an outsider to them. They were always so worried about drama, like I was the problem. Sarah? Greg's voice cut through my thoughts. I blinked, refocusing. Did you hear that last part? Yeah, sorry, I said, clearing my throat. I think we should move forward with the plan as discussed. Let's look at the timeline again. I forced my attention back into the meeting. It was hard, but I did it. The conversation droned on, and by the time we wrapped up, I was already mentally calculating how to deal with the next piece of business. The moment I was free, I pulled out my phone and called the bank. I needed to accelerate a loan payment. There was no time to waste. I pushed through the call, making arrangements. If there was one thing I knew, it was how to take control of a situation, even if it hurt, even if it was my family. As the call ended, I leaned back in my chair, exhaling. My brother and Megan had always seen me as the black sheep, but this exclusion, it stung in a way I didn't expect. I had worked my ass off in a tech career that they could never understand. It was always too much work for me, too distant, even though I had built something real. I clenched my jaw. It wasn't about them, not anymore. I leaned back in my chair, the phone call still ringing in my ears. The weight of Matt's message had hit me harder than I expected. I shouldn't have been surprised, though. This was the dynamic, wasn't it? Matt and Megan, always the golden couple, and me, the odd one out. I thought back to last year's family reunion, the one where I barely got a word in edgewise. Everyone was too busy asking about their promotions and their vacation plans. Megan had pulled me aside in the kitchen, her tone sweet but sharp, like she was doing me a favor by being honest with me. "You're so career-driven, Sarah," she had said, pushing a strand of hair behind her ear like she was letting me in on some great secret. "You need to come back to reality, to real family values. You've been so disconnected, always working. No one ever sees you anymore. It's like you don't care." I hadn't said much at the time, too stunned by the attack to process it. But I remember the way her words stung. I remember how she smiled like she'd just made the most insightful observation. The kind of smile people give you when they think they've got you figured out. What Megan didn't know, what none of them really understood, was that I had to build my life that way. My startup wasn't going to grow itself. There was no room for half-assed effort, no space for me to be present at every family dinner or weekend BBQ. There were things I had to sacrifice, things they'd never understand. But in their eyes, I was the problem. I shifted in my chair, trying to shake off the memory. I had spent so many years in their shadow, trying to meet expectations that weren't mine to meet. Matt had always been the golden boy. Megan, the perfect wife. They bought the house, they had the kids, they lived the life everyone envied. And then there was me, always too busy, always too focused on my tech career, the one they looked at like it was some kind of alien occupation. I hated that feeling, of being looked down on, of always being the misunderstood sister. It wasn't just last year, it was every year, as if I wasn't trying to build something real. My company had grown from a few rough ideas into a full-fledged software development firm, and I was damn proud of what I had accomplished. But I could already hear Megan's voice in my head, talking about how I was too focused on my job, how empty my life must be without the right kind of family connections. I had spent so many years second-guessing myself. But now I knew better. I knew my work mattered. It wasn't less than the life Matt and Megan had built. It was just different. I ran a hand over my face, the exhaustion of the day creeping in. The sting of their exclusion still sat heavy on my chest, but something else was rising too. Betrayal. I had helped them, in my own way. I'd loaned them money a few years ago when they were struggling with their mortgage. I'd picked up the pieces when they'd screwed up their finances, and yet here they were, pushing me out of the family vacation because I didn't fit into their perfect little world. It was a hard pill to swallow, but it was the reality I'd known for a while. They didn't get it, and maybe they never would, but I'd learned how to stand on my own. If that made me the outsider, then so be it. I glanced at my phone again, the message still open. No drama. They didn't want drama, but they didn't seem to realize they were the ones creating it. They didn't see the sacrifices I'd made, the late nights working to get my company off the ground, the endless rejections from investors, the pressure of competing in a field that moved faster than anything they could comprehend. I'd built something real, even if they couldn't see it, even if they never would. A sharp pang of anger shot through me, but I fought it down. I wasn't going to let this mess with my focus. If they wanted peace and quiet, I'd give it to them. But peace had a price, and it wasn't always about keeping the peace. I pulled up the loan file, the familiar stack of documents and numbers that felt like a lifeline. If I was going to follow through with this, I needed the details. The bank had sent the last statement a few months ago, but the picture hadn't changed. If anything, it had gotten worse. Matt and Megan's house was struggling, and I knew it. I sifted through the reports, the refinance details catching my eye first. They'd borrowed more than they should have. There had been talk at family events about their dream home in the suburbs, how it was a great investment, but I knew the truth. The property had been a stretch from the beginning, and now it was underwater, buried beneath an avalanche of bad decisions. The refinancing wasn't the only thing messing with their finances. They'd taken out a new line of credit recently, funding vacations to Europe, buying designer furniture, taking weekend trips that put them deeper into debt. They had no concept of restraint, no understanding of how their choices would ripple out. The deeper I dug, the more I saw it. They were living on borrowed time. I sat back for a moment, processing the information. The numbers clicked into place like a puzzle I had already solved. I could accelerate the due date on their loan, force them to pay it all off in 30 days, or else foreclosure. It wasn't a decision I made lightly, but the satisfaction that followed was hard to deny. They thought they were in control, that their perfect life was untouchable. But it wasn't. Not anymore. I was in a position to make a move, and I couldn't help but feel the weight of that power settling over me. I thought about calling Olivia, but I already knew what I needed to do. I didn't need anyone else's approval. Matt and Megan had crossed a line. They wanted to cut me out? Fine. But now they'd have to deal with the consequences of their own financial recklessness. They had always thought they were above it all. I grabbed my phone and hit dial, waiting for Olivia to pick up. The phone rang twice before she answered. "Sarah, what's up?" "Olivia, I need to move on the Thompson loan," I said, keeping my voice steady, despite the rush of adrenaline in my veins. "I want to accelerate the due date. 30 days. If they can't pay, I want to trigger foreclosure." There was a long pause on the other end, just long enough for me to wonder if she was second-guessing the plan. But when she spoke again, her voice was neutral. "Are you sure? You know this will cause a lot of fallout. It's not just Matt and Megan we're dealing with. It'll hit their credit, maybe even their relationship with the bank." "I know," I said, my voice flat, "but they've been living above their means for years, and they still think they can get away with it. This is the wake-up call they need. They pushed me out. Now I'm pushing back." "All right," Olivia said after a beat. "I'll get started on the paperwork, but once we send it through, there's no turning back. They'll have to come up with the full balance in 30 days. "Do it," I said, cutting her off. "Just make sure they get the notice. I want them to know it's real." We ended the call, and I sat there for a moment staring at the screen. There was no going back now. Part of me was repulsed by the thought, the idea that I was going to push my own brother and his wife to the edge. It felt like a betrayal, but it was a necessary one. They had made their bed. Now they were going to lie in it. They wanted peace. They didn't get to dictate the terms anymore. They had pushed me out of their perfect world, and now I was going to make sure they realized just how fragile that world really was. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers pressing into the edges of the desk, grounding myself. This was the only way I could get their attention, but I knew there would be consequences, emotional, maybe even personal. This wouldn't be easy, and I didn't expect it to be. Still, I couldn't help but feel a sharp, guilty satisfaction. I was playing the game on my terms now. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of what I'd just set in motion settle over me. The paperwork would be processed, the loan accelerated, and there would be no turning back. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I picked up the phone and dialed Olivia again. "Hey, I need you to do me a favor," I said when she picked up. I want you to check the condition of the property. Matt and Megan's place. I've got a feeling it's worse than they're letting on. Sure, I'll have someone send over a report. You thinking of adding that to the file for the foreclosure? Exactly, I said. I want to see if there's anything that could push the value down even further. Something to back up the decision. She paused for a moment, probably scanning her calendar, then responded, All right, I'll have it done by tomorrow. It'll take a bit to get someone out there, but I'll rush it. I hung up staring at the blank screen of my laptop. I wasn't sure what I expected. Maybe a perfectly pristine lawn, a fresh coat of paint, a few trees in the backyard, all in the kind of image that Megan and Matt had always liked to present. But I knew better, and soon enough, I'd get confirmation of just how deep their financial mismanagement ran. The next day, Olivia called me with her findings. Sarah, you were right. The place is in bad shape. The paint's peeling off the house. The yard's completely overgrown. And the pool? It's falling apart. They claimed it was under renovation, but it's just been left untouched for months. I let out a breath. Not surprising, but it still stung to hear it out loud. Megan and Matt had never been the type to do things halfway. They'd always made everything seem perfect, always tried to keep up appearances. And now it was clear that the reality behind the facade was a mess. The pool was supposed to be an investment, Olivia continued, but it's a liability at this point. No one's touched it in months. I smiled to myself, a little grimly. Figures. Anything else? They've been consistently late on their payments. It's not just once or twice either. A lot of those payments have been delayed, racking up late fees. It's no surprise they're underwater. I felt a flash of vindication. They hadn't just messed up in one area, they'd done it across the board, living beyond their means, trying to pretend they were still at the top of the food chain. Okay, I said, getting to the heart of it. I want to know exactly how far behind they are on payments. And I need a full assessment of the property's current value. I don't care if it takes a few days. Get it done. Got it, Olivia said before hanging up. I sat there for a minute, letting the quiet wash over me. I wasn't feeling the rush of power anymore. That had faded. Instead, I felt something else. A dull, gnawing ache. Sure, I was getting everything I'd hoped for. I was one step away from pulling the rug out from under them. But at what cost? This wasn't just business anymore. This was family. I didn't want to feel bad about it, but I couldn't shake the sense that the more I uncovered, the more I was disconnecting from them. It was easier to look at the numbers, easy to ignore the faces attached to them. But somewhere deep down, I knew that once I made the final call, there was no going back. This would be the moment I crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I turned to my computer screen and started pulling up other files, trying to keep myself busy. I couldn't afford to be distracted now. Olivia's next report would be the final piece of the puzzle. I knew it. Once I had the full assessment, once the property was officially devalued, the next steps would fall into place. I thought of Matt and Megan, their perfect life, the vacations, the house they'd tried to make into something it wasn't. They hadn't been honest with anyone, least of all themselves. They'd wanted to keep up the image of success, but they'd let the truth slip through the cracks. And now they'd have to face it. I pushed my emotions aside, steeling myself for whatever came next. The decision had already been made. Now I just had to wait for the paperwork to follow. And when it did, I would be ready. On the evening of December 22nd, as I was pulling my coat on to head out, I got another text from Matt. Hey Sarah, just wanted to confirm that you won't be joining us for the family vacation this year. Megan's really stressed about the situation. We were hoping you'd understand. I stood there for a second, staring at the screen. Megan's stressed? I could almost hear her voice now, passive-aggressive, like she had the weight of the world on her shoulders. They were the ones causing the drama, but somehow they always spun it around to make it seem like I was the one with the issue. A sharp rush of anger hit me, followed by something else I couldn't quite place. Amusement, maybe? The irony was almost too much. They were blind to their own mess. They thought the vacation was going to fix things, as if the perfect family getaway would somehow erase the financial chaos they had buried themselves in. I was the problem, but they were too deep in their own bubble to see it. I typed a quick response. I'll be elsewhere for the holidays. Already booked a trip to the coast. There was no need to say more. What was there to say, really? Megan would continue to cling to her idea of perfection, and Matt would keep pretending he had it all under control. But I wasn't a part of that narrative anymore, not in the way they wanted me to be. I wasn't going to sit there and play the dutiful sister, making nice while they excluded me. I hit send, tossed my phone on the counter, and grabbed my bag. Later that night, After the last of my work was done and the house was quiet, I pulled out my phone again. I wasn't finished yet. I couldn't let this go. Not without making sure they fully understood the consequences of their actions. I dialed Olivia, feeling the familiar weight of decision settle into my chest. The process had already begun, but there was still room for one last move, one last push. I couldn't afford to be merciful, not now. I needed them to face the reality of their situation, the way they'd forced me to face mine. I needed to remind them who was in control. Olivia, I want to expedite the foreclosure process, I said, my voice calm, though the edges of it felt sharp to me. No delays. I want everything set to go through in the next few days. Don't give them any extra time. 30 days. That's the deal. There was a slight pause on the other end, but she didn't argue. Understood. I'll have the documents prepped and ready for signature by tomorrow. You sure about this? It's going to move quickly once we pull the trigger. I'm sure, I said. Make sure they know exactly what's coming. I want them to feel the pressure. Got it. You'll have everything you need in the morning. We hung up, and I sat in the quiet of my apartment for a moment, letting the decision settle. I'd made it. I knew it was the right move, but it didn't make it any easier. It wasn't easy, not by a long shot. There was no part of me that was jumping for joy over this. I wasn't basking in some victorious moment. I'd taken control, but that didn't change the fact that this was family. Blood. Despite everything, I'd spent my life trying to fit into their world, only to be shoved out when it no longer suited them. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. A part of me was still trying to justify it, to make sense of the guilt creeping in, but it didn't change the facts. Matt and Megan had chosen their path. I wasn't the one who'd pushed them into this mess. I had my reasons, but I still couldn't help the pang of regret that hit every now and then. There was no going back now. This was the line I had drawn, and I had to live with the consequences. But as I thought about the next few weeks, about the chaos this would cause, I couldn't shake the sense of detachment creeping in. This wasn't personal anymore. It was business. It had to be. I wasn't the sister they wanted me to be. I wasn't the one to be pushed aside and told to play nice when they decided to screw everything up. It felt strange to have this much control, this much distance from the emotions I used to get caught up in. I was doing what needed to be done. They were going to learn what it meant to ignore their responsibilities, and I was done waiting for them to notice me. Christmas morning was exactly what I needed. I woke up to the sound of waves crashing against the shore and the warm sun filtering through the curtains of my room. I stepped out onto the balcony of the resort, coffee in hand, and breathed in the salty air. For the first time in weeks, everything felt still. The chaos of the past few months seemed a world away. I took a slow sip of my coffee, letting the bitterness cut through the warmth, and glanced out at the water. I wasn't thinking about Matt or Megan or anything involving my family. For once, I was completely free of their drama. The phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me out of my thoughts. My heart sank when I saw my mother's name on the screen. It wasn't unusual for her to call on the holidays, but the tone of her calls had been off lately, like she was walking on eggshells around me. I answered quickly, trying to keep my voice steady. Hey, Mom. Merry Christmas. Sarah, her voice was tight, strained. I don't know what to do. Matt got a legal notice today. It's about the house. I leaned against the railing, the warmth of the sun suddenly feeling distant. What kind of notice? Her voice cracked as she continued. It's demanding the full loan balance. He can't afford it. He said it's due now, that he has to pay it all in 30 days, or they'll lose the house. I stared out at the ocean, my mind already processing the details. I knew exactly what had happened. I had set the wheels in motion weeks ago. Mom, I said, keeping my tone even, I'm the one who owns the mortgage. The loan is in my name. The notice they got is part of the process. They've been given 30 days to pay the full amount, or it goes to foreclosure. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, trying to piece it together. Sarah, why would you do this? They're your family. Matt's your brother. I'm not doing anything to them, Mom, I said, forcing the calmness into my voice. They've been living way beyond their means, and they don't take responsibility for it. I gave them more than enough time, but it's too late for that now. My mom's voice wavered. But, Sarah, they don't have the money. How could you? Because they refused to listen, I said, cutting her off. I wasn't about to soften this. I'd tried to be patient with them, but they'd ignored every warning. You don't get to live like everything's perfect and then expect everyone else to clean up your mess. They made their choices. I just don't understand why you're doing this, she repeated, her words full of disbelief. I pressed my palm to my forehead, fighting the headache building behind my eyes. I'm not doing this to them, Mom. I'm doing this because they don't have any idea how to handle their finances. They never have. If they won't take responsibility, then it's up to me to step in. But Christmas, Sarah, it's Christmas. I took a deep breath, my fingers curling around the coffee cup as I gazed out at the horizon. I'm not the one who made it about money. They did. I'm not going to pretend it's all okay when it's not. Her silence on the other end was deafening. I knew she didn't understand, and maybe she never would. But this was how it had to be. I don't know if I can do this, Sarah, she said quietly, almost pleading. I can't handle it if Matt loses everything. Mom, he's not going to lose everything, I said, my voice still steady, but the words felt like they were slipping out of my control. This isn't about him losing everything. It's about him taking responsibility, and if he doesn't, then it's not my problem anymore. Her voice softened, but I could hear the worry in it. I know you're angry, but family is supposed to stick together. You're his sister. I exhaled slowly. I am his sister, but I'm also someone who spent years watching him and Megan bury themselves in debt. They could have asked for help, but they never did. This is what happens when you live in denial. I could feel my resolve harden with every word, but somewhere deep down, I felt a quiet tug of something else, something that felt like regret. I had spent so much of my life carving my own path, building something from the ground up. But now, this was the fallout. This was the price of stepping away from the role they'd always wanted me to play. Mom, I said, my voice softer now, I know this is hard, but I can't be the one to fix it for them anymore. I've already done more than enough. She didn't answer for a long time. I wondered if she even knew how to respond. But finally she whispered, I just don't want to lose you too. I swallowed, the words sticking in my throat. You won't. I'm right here. But Matt and Megan have to figure this out on their own. I hung up the phone without saying goodbye, feeling the weight of everything press in on me. My mom, my brother, Megan. It was all starting to feel like too much. I'd made a decision, but in that moment, I couldn't shake the feeling that maybe I was losing something too. Something I didn't want to lose, even though I had no idea how to get it back. I looked out at the water, the waves rolling in steadily, and wondered what would happen when Matt and Megan finally realized what I'd done. Would they hate me for it? Would they ever forgive me? I didn't know the answer. But I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't turn back now. I got back from my vacation late in the afternoon, the last of the holiday rush still hanging in the air. The beach felt like it was ages ago. I walked into my apartment, the quiet of the place swallowing me whole, but then my phone buzzed almost immediately. I glanced at the screen, missed calls from Matt, followed by a string of frantic texts from both him and Megan. I scrolled through them quickly. Sarah, please, we don't understand what's happening. We didn't think it would come to this. Please, can we talk? We're not asking for much. This is the worst possible time. Please help us. I let out a slow breath, almost amused at how quickly they'd shifted from exclusion to desperation. It felt satisfying in a way, but it also stung, that sick feeling of guilt bubbling up just beneath the surface. I didn't want to feel bad, but I did. Before I could respond, my phone rang again. Matt's name flashed on the screen. I wasn't surprised. I answered, letting it ring for a moment before I picked up. Sarah, his voice cracked. Sarah, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry. For everything. For how I treated you. For excluding you from the vacation. For being so damn distant for all these years. You've been right. You've always been right. And I don't know what happened to me. To us. I didn't say anything. I just let him talk. Part of me wanted to feel the satisfaction of hearing him grovel, but another part, the part that still cared, felt something deeper. Please, Sarah, don't do this. Don't let us lose everything. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll make things right. Just don't take the house from us. I stayed silent for a long moment, feeling the weight of his words settle into my chest. I wanted to respond, to tell him how much I was hurting, but I kept it in. Megan's voice cut through, shaky and high-pitched. Sarah, I was wrong. I've been so wrong about you, about everything. I've judged you, and I've made you out to be something you're not, and I'm so sorry. Please don't do this. I don't know what we're going to do if we lose the house. Her voice cracked again, and I felt a pang of something, regret maybe, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't about me feeling sorry for them. It was about consequences. I'm not asking for anything more than what's fair, I said, my voice firm. You've had months, years to figure this out. You've been living in denial, running up debt, thinking you could always rely on me. I can't fix this for you anymore. I heard them both quiet down, the realization hitting them like a ton of bricks. Please, Sarah, Matt said, his voice almost pleading. Please just give us a chance. We'll do anything. We'll make it right. I felt the sharp sting of guilt again. I was holding all the cards now. It was a power I didn't want but couldn't ignore. I exhaled slowly, deciding I needed to take control of this conversation, once and for all. All right, we can talk, but here's the deal. No more delays, no more excuses. I'm done with the games. You want a loan modification? Fine, but I'm not making any promises. And I want you both in my office, on time, ready to discuss how you're going to handle your finances right now, not after more time spent pretending everything's fine. There was a long pause on the other end, but I could hear their breaths, the relief seeping through despite everything. Thank you, Matt said, the words heavy with emotion. We won't disappoint you again. I swear I didn't reply, just set the phone down a little harder than I meant to. The weight of the conversation lingered, pressing down on me like a weight I wasn't sure I could carry. I stared out the window, trying to let my thoughts settle. There was something hollow about this, something that didn't feel like victory. I'd taken control, but in the process, I'd created this rift, this distance I couldn't ignore. What was the cost of all this? I had what I wanted, the upper hand. But it felt like a Pyrrhic victory. I shook my head, trying to push those thoughts out. I didn't have time to second-guess myself. I had to stick with the plan. The meeting was set, no more excuses, no more pretending. But even as I steeled myself for what was to come, a voice inside me whispered, "How far are you willing to go to make them see what you've built?" The office was too quiet when Matt and Megan walked in, their lawyer trailing behind them like a shadow. They looked different, smaller, more fragile, like all the air had been sucked out of their perfect world. I didn't offer them coffee or pleasantries. They didn't deserve either. Matt shifted uncomfortably as he sat down, Megan beside him, her face flushed but her expression hard. Their lawyer sat across from them, adjusting his glasses, glancing at me briefly as if he were trying to measure the situation. I wasn't sure if he was more concerned about his clients or about keeping his distance from the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. I stayed quiet for a long moment, just letting the silence stretch out between us. They both looked at me, their faces a mix of desperation and shame, and I was sure they thought I was going to cave. Matt cleared his throat first. Sarah, look, we know we've messed up. We've been living beyond our means for years, trying to keep up appearances when we couldn't afford it. We were wrong. You were right. We get it now. But please, please don't take the house. Please don't ruin everything. Megan chimed in quickly, her voice higher than usual. We never wanted to hurt you. We just didn't know how to handle everything. But we're family. You can't just let us lose everything like this. We've made mistakes, but we'll make it right. We'll change, I promise. I didn't respond immediately, letting their words hang in the air, suffocating them with the weight of their reality. I wanted to feel pity for them. Honestly, I did, but I couldn't. They'd made their choices, and now they had to face the consequences. Finally, I broke the silence. You think I'm here to fix your mess? I asked, my voice even, but carrying the bite of something colder. You think I'm gonna just bail you out because we're family? Number that ship sailed the moment you started living like you were untouchable. They both stiffened, and I could see the flicker of panic in their eyes. Their lawyer didn't speak, probably not wanting to make things worse, but I could tell he was just waiting for me to finish. I'm willing to negotiate, I continued, my voice steady as I leaned forward, my hands resting flat on the table. But it's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be on your terms. First off, I'm willing to reduce your interest rate, but you have 30 days, no excuses, to refinance the loan. If that doesn't happen, the house is gone. You don't get another chance. Megan opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off with a raised hand. No more excuses. I'm done with the delays. You've had plenty of time. This is the deadline. Either you meet it or you lose everything. There was a beat of silence, and I could see them both digesting the ultimatum. I didn't expect them to get it right away, but I wasn't done yet. And one more thing, I added, locking eyes with Matt. You're going to apologize to Mom for the way you've treated her, for the years of judgment, for making her feel like she wasn't important enough to be included in your perfect little world. Megan's face flushed red, but Matt looked like he was about to crack. I could almost see the walls coming down, his emotions flickering on the surface. We're sorry, Matt said, his voice tight but real. We should have done better by her. And we were wrong. That's the least you can do, I said, not backing down. And one more thing, publicly, you'll acknowledge how wrong you were about me, about my career. You're going to admit that you judged me, that you treated me like I was lesser because I chose a different path. You'll say it to the family, to everyone you've lied to about me for years. They both look like they'd been slapped. Megan's eyes welled up, her face going pale. Matt's jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. I've done everything I can to make my own way, despite your criticism. And I'm not asking for your approval anymore, but I am asking for you to be honest for once. For all the years you've pretended like you knew what was best for me, like you had the right to judge my choices. It ends now. Megan wiped at her eyes, her voice shaking as she spoke. We were wrong. We were just scared. We didn't know how to deal with the fact that you were succeeding when we couldn't. It made us feel like we weren't good enough. I didn't soften. I couldn't. I'd been the one left out, the one who'd been written off for years, and now that they needed me, they wanted my mercy. Number. Not this time, Matt nodded, his face resigned. We'll do it. We'll apologize. We'll do whatever you want. We just need this. Please. I sat back, arms crossed, looking at them both. They had no idea what they were in for. They didn't know how far I could push them, how much I could make them sweat. Fine, I said, my voice icy. But don't mistake this for me being a soft touch. You get one shot at this. You don't come through, and the house is gone. I'm not negotiating further. There was a long, heavy silence as they both sat there, fully aware of the gravity of what they'd agreed to. I could tell they were trying to find a way out, but there was no more room to maneuver. I had all the power now. Is that clear? I asked, looking between them and their lawyer. Crystal, the lawyer said quietly, glancing between me and my brother and sister. I nodded once, feeling the weight of the moment settle into me. This was what it had come to, my family finally realizing how wrong they'd been. And while it felt like victory, it wasn't the kind I'd imagined, not the one I'd hoped for. But at least now it was all out in the open, and I'd finally made them see me for who I was. A month had passed since the meeting, and as I sat in the restaurant, watching Matt and Megan fidget at the table, I couldn't help but notice how much things had changed. They weren't perfect, far from it, but they had finally acknowledged the truth. The dinner wasn't the grand family gathering it might have been before all of this happened. There were no pretensions anymore. There was a new kind of honesty in the air, and it wasn't as comfortable as I thought it would be. Matt cleared his throat, the flicker of nerves crossing his face as he pushed his glass of water around the table. He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in a long while. I couldn't tell if it was guilt or something else, but I wasn't about to wait for him to get his words together. I owe you an apology, he began, voice a little too tight, like he was working through it. For everything. For the way we treated you. For the way I judged you. Your career, your life. I was wrong. I was so focused on trying to make everything look perfect that I couldn't see how much you were actually doing, how much you had achieved. I kept my face neutral, not giving him the satisfaction of seeing how much his words were affecting me. It took you long enough, I said, my voice colder than I meant it to be. He flinched but nodded, taking a deep breath. I know, and I'm sorry it took something so big for me to see it, for us to see it. I think I was just scared. Scared of not being enough, scared of what I didn't understand, but that's no excuse for how I treated you. Megan shifted uncomfortably next to him, her eyes red-rimmed as she looked down at her plate. She hadn't said much yet, but I could tell she was trying to summon the courage to speak. When she finally did, her voice cracked, the apology slipping out almost as a confession. I was wrong too, she said, her words slow but sincere. I judged you, Sarah. I judged your choices, your success. I was insecure, I think. I didn't know how to handle the fact that you were building something, and I was still stuck in the same place. I took it out on you, and I'm so sorry. The weight of her words settled into the space between us. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the sincerity in her eyes. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was just saying it, admitting what had been eating at her. I know it wasn't fair, she continued, her voice smaller now. I was just, I was jealous, and I didn't want to admit it. I wanted you to fail so I could feel better about my own mistakes. But that wasn't your fault. I'm sorry. The apology was simple, but it hit harder than I thought it would. I'd expected something more drawn out, more self serving. But this was raw. This was real. And as much as I hated to admit it, it made the whole thing feel worth it. I nodded, keeping my expression controlled. I appreciate that, I said, keeping it short. But this doesn't change everything. It doesn't erase what happened. Matt and Megan nodded in unison, their faces resigned. They knew I wasn't about to go easy on them, and they were right. I had no interest in pretending like this dinner was some kind of magical reset. But it was a start, a step towards something real. They'd refinanced their mortgage, just as they'd promised. No more debt on the house. They had learned the hard way about financial responsibility, and now they had to live with it. The luxury vacations, the expensive dinners, the image they'd been desperately trying to maintain, all of it had crumbled. But in its place, there was something I hadn't expected: accountability. It wasn't the kind of thing you could just get back by fixing a mortgage. It came from within. We sat in silence for a moment, the tension easing slightly as the waiter brought our food. I wasn't sure what to say next, but it didn't matter. The important part had already happened. They'd seen me, really seen me, for the first time in years. They'd acknowledged the woman I'd become, even if it took all this pain for them to get there. I didn't feel victorious, not in the way I thought I would. But there was a quiet sense of resolution inside me. I hadn't won in the way I imagined, but maybe that was the point. I didn't need to win at all. What mattered now was that they'd learned their lesson, and I had too. Family wasn't about power. It wasn't about money or success. It was about being real with each other finally. Matt and Megan had apologized. But for me, the real change was that they were finally seeing the truth. They could never go back to their old ways, and neither could I. But maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild something better. The lesson wasn't about money or control. It was about breaking down the walls we'd built, the ones that had kept us from really knowing each other. And that was something worth more than any apology. It was something I could finally live with.